What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, we're talking about the best goalkeepers at every price point. Goalkeeper conversations tend to be a little bit boring for FPL. It's not a position that people spend a lot of time on, but this year FPL have maybe made it a little bit more interesting given how they've reduced the prices of some of the top goalkeepers in particular. So we're going to talk about them all. If you enjoy it, please do give it a like, hit that subscribe button if you're new around here. Let's jump into it. So I've been playing FPL for over 10 years at this point, and it feels like this is the first season where engaged managers, so those on like YouTube, Twitter, using websites and stuff like that, are seriously considering going for a premium goalkeeper from the off. Now, part of the reason is the price. Of course, they have come down a little bit. A lot of these goalkeepers would have been £6 million in the past, but also I do think the early wildcard is playing a part in how people select their game week 1 squads. We talked about this quite a lot. Guests that have come on the channel have also mentioned it, because there's going to be a high kind of reason to use it early, right? Because of the unlimited transfers for the World Cup, you're not necessarily going to be stuck with this player for too long, just in case things go wrong. So in the past, you might have wildcarded early, you might have saved it to like game week 12, maybe game week 15, whenever you needed it, and therefore most people went for a 4.5 million goalkeeper because they were good value and it meant that you kept money out of your goalkeeper position. Whereas this year, if you're going to wildcard around game week 5, 6, 7 or 8, something like that, then having a 5.5 million goalkeeper for a short amount of time doesn't feel that bad. And obviously, players like Ederson and Alisson for Man City and Liverpool have also got good fixtures. They should get a good amount of clean sheets as we, at least in the early stages, right? In terms of the best option, I've put Ederson as the number one. To be honest with you, and I've said this in other videos about different positions and various different price points, the difference between Ederson and Alisson is not that big. You could argue that Alisson is a slightly better option than Ederson, but ultimately, Man City is the best defence. I think fixtures are quite similar between the two. The main reason I've gone for Ederson is I don't think you're ever that worried about locking off that third Man City player, because ultimately there is going to be rotation with their attackers. A lot of people might be looking at Haaland or Cancelo or Diaz, but probably not all three, and therefore to get a defender from Man City for only 5.5 million feels quite valuable. So that's why I've put him at number one. I think you have to consider the defender options and the other options from the team when you're making your choice. With Liverpool, there's less reason to kind of want to go for Alisson because there's so many good outfield options. I know they're all more expensive, but Salah, Trent, Robertson, Diaz, we've talked about them a lot already, and they're going to be really popular. And for that reason, I don't really like Alisson. Again, you could make the argument that, I've just used myself. This is only a short-term move. If you're happy to go with just Salah and Trent, or Salah and Robertson, Salah and Diaz, or whoever it is, whatever combination of two other Liverpool players, then you could absolutely go for Alisson because he will get a decent amount of points. But I just think if I was picking between the two, I'd probably veer towards Ederson from game week 1. And ultimately, I don't think you can go for Lloris over either of these two unless you've already got 3 Man City and 3 Liverpool players outside of the goalkeeper position. I just don't think you give Lloris serious consideration at the same price. Spurs defence is decent and it might improve again this year, but it's not quite as good as Liverpool and Man City. And I would say the fixtures aren't that much better to warrant going for him instead. And also, you can get Spurs defenders for 5 million, possibly even less. I don't think the likes of Jed Spence and Sessegnon are going to be options because of rotation, but Romero, Dyer, maybe Doherty if he starts the season, they're all a bit cheaper. And of course, if Perisic is also fit to start, he's the same price as Lloris. So I think for Spurs, the defender options are slightly better, so I wouldn't go for him. So Ederson, for me, if you're going to spend 5.5, probably the best pick. There ain't much in it between him and Alisson, though. So I've called this the Thanks FPL bracket because I think when goalkeeper prices came out, people were pretty thankful that they didn't make them too expensive. So in the past, if someone like Ramsdale had done really well at 4.5, he might have got shoved straight to 5.5 million. We've seen that with Pope and with Martinez in the past. So it was nice that they kept a lot of them at 5 million. I do think if we're weighing them up against each other, Mendy probably does come out just a little bit ahead of Ramsdale, purely because Chelsea defence is just so good. It's always in the top 3, and it is just a better defence than Arsenal. Arsenal's defence is decent, but it's not at that level yet, so I'd probably back him. The other thing I like, if you're not keen on having like Chilwell and Reece James, and you're not going for like Koulibaly or Thiago Silva, someone like that, Mendy is a full 1 million less than the other kind of, or the attacking Chelsea defenders. So that's another nice thing about him. If you rate the Chelsea defence, but you only want one of James or Chilwell, Mendy's another nice way to get in on those clean sheets. What I will say though is, at least for my drafts anyway, James and Chilwell make a lot of them, and because of that I don't know if I would want to triple up on Chelsea. I don't think it's necessarily a bad idea. If you think they're going to get clean sheets, then having a few defenders and a goalkeeper is not necessarily a bad move, but that would potentially stop you without a few hits get into one of their attackers. And the likes of Mason Mount, Sterling and Havertz could be genuinely great options very early on this season. So that's the only downside to Mendy for me. If you're really keen on Chilwell and James, I don't know if I would want to triple up. And if that's the case, I probably would go for Ramsdale as the best £5 million keeper. Again, I would rate Arsenal defence ahead of Wolves defence. And even though Wolves fixtures look good on paper, I would suspect that Arsenal will get more clean sheets early on. And again, if you're comparing goalkeepers to defenders, there's not really an out-and-out super attacking Arsenal defender for 5 million, right? So the likes of Zinchenko, who might play in midfield and could do decent, and Gabriel at the back, decent goal threat. They're good, but they're not much better than Ramsdale. Whereas with Chelsea, Chilwell and James are better than Mendy, even though you pay a premium for that. So I think the way I set up my draft, I'd be more likely to have Ramsdale because of all those factors I just talked about. But on an individual level, I think Mendy will probably do better than Ramsdale for the first 6, if that makes sense. And then with Jose Sarr, I just don't know if I'm that convinced by the Wolves' defence, and if they do switch formation to a 4 at the back, how will that affect them? There's just a few too many unknowns, and I don't know if I'm willing to pay 5 million for Jose Sarr. I think at that point I'd possibly go down to a 4.5 million goalkeeper instead. He did get quite a few save points last year. He did do really well for Wolves, and he is a decent keeper. I think he did really well for them last year. He was probably one of their best players, to be fair. But again, if I'm spending 5 million, I'm going for one of the other two. And if I've already got the maximum Chelsea and Arsenal slots, I may even just go to a 4.5 before I went for Jose Sarr. So I've called this one the classic bracket because in years gone past, you wouldn't even look a goalkeeper more expensive than 4.5. You just select the best 4.5, move on with your day and start tinkering with other positions in your squad. Not quite the same this year because people are looking at more expensive goalkeepers. But if you only have 4.5 to spend, these are probably the top 3 that I would look at. Like, I've not got the likes of Pickford in there because I don't necessarily rate the Everton defence too highly. Arguably, I don't really rate the Leeds defence too highly either. But I'll come on to Melier in just a minute. The reason I've got Sanchez at the top is a similar reason that I had Mendy at the top of the 5s and Ederson at the top of the 5.5s, because he plays for the best defence, at least from all the goalkeepers that are priced at 4.5. Brighton defence usually does very well and expected goals conceded. They don't concede a huge amount of chances. They don't tend to get battered that often either, so I like Sanchez. Bit of context around that, they have lost Basuma. Will that affect them enough to make them not a good choice for defenders? I'm not so sure. You've also got Dunk as an outfield defender, obviously at 4.5. Lamptey, if he gets regular minutes, is also a good option as well. So it's not like a shoe-in that you have to go for Sanchez, but I do like him, and I did start with him last season as well. You could look at those fixtures, Man United away and West Ham away, and just say they're not quite as good. You could target someone else instead. But Ray has also got to play Man United, and Leeds have got to play Chelsea away. So it's not like the other 2 sets of fixtures are extremely better than anyone else's here. So I think Sanchez probably is the best, even if he's not that exciting to go for. I will say with goalkeepers, because they don't tend to have those kind of big hauls, right? They're not likely to get you like a 15 or 20 point haul. The points difference between them will probably be minimal, especially over like 5 to 6 weeks. So if you did want to do something that you consider a little bit more interesting or a little bit more out there, you're probably not going to fall behind the pack that much compared to maybe if you went different in other positions. So I'll just say that because I know Sanchez just doesn't sound that interesting. Raya, again, Brentford defence, not bad last year, not quite as good as Brighton, but decent enough. Again, will that move to possibly a more permanent-ish 4-3-3 affect them at the back? Possibly, and if that's the case, Raya might not be quite as good, possibly further down the list. But ultimately, again, their opening 6 fixtures are quite good. So I do like him. I think he's going to be number 1 as well, unless pre-season tells us any different. I don't see why that wouldn't be the case, right? Unless he gets sold. I did see some rumours that he might want to go, but so far that hasn't surfaced. And then we got Meslier, right? I've included him. I know there's lots of other 4.5 million options, but he's getting a bit of traction in the community. A lot of the FPL people on Twitter are talking about him, and I get it. It's a bit different. You're hoping for save points. You're hoping that Jesse Marsch is a bit better defensively than Bielsa was. Lots of new signings. We don't know quite how they're going to play, so some people want to make that bet early that Leeds will be better than they have been over the last 2 years. I'd always be a bit more cautious around that. Their defence has been completely awful the last 2 years. They've conceded a lot of chances, conceded a lot of goals. They've always been a team to target over the past 2 years. So I'd be a bit sceptical about how quick Jesse Marsch can turn that around this season. But again, coming back to that earlier point about the fact that, you know, there's not going to be too many points differences between a Sanchez, between a Raya and between a Meslier. If you want to go different, if you want to back Leeds, if you think the save points are there as well, Meslier might not be a bad option, because at least Leeds do have, apart from Chelsea, pretty decent fixtures. So I've had Raya in a few teams. I think right now I'd probably have Sanchez. Who knows? Maybe I'll take a punt on Meslier by the time it gets to game week 1. So I know there's going to be quite a lot of talk about why haven't you mentioned this goalkeeper? Why haven't you mentioned that goalkeeper? The idea is to give the kind of best, second best, and third best at every single price point, rather than talking about every single possible option. But just to go through a few names that I know are going to be in the comments who I want to talk about, and ignore the team as always. I'm just tinkering around and playing around with different stuff. That's not the kind of team that I'm going for right now. Like Schmeichel, I don't really rate the fixtures that great early on for Leicester, and they've also got some 4.5 million defenders. So Ricardo, Castagna, Justin could be really good options if they're nailed on. David De Gea, I just wouldn't trust Man United early on. Dalot is probably also a better option for less money. Nick Pope, I really like as an option, and I do agree that Newcastle might be a defence to target at some point. I'm just not sure about these first 5 with the Man City and Liverpool fixtures in there. And again, though, talking about an early wild card, right, up until possibly the World Cup when we get unlimited transfers again. Maybe if it's around game week 7 or 8, or maybe even game week 6, Nick Pope might be the best option at 5 million. So I don't think I'd go for him for game week 1, but I might do it on an early wild card, right? Then Fabianski, probably not looking there. And then you've got the other 4.5, so the likes of Pickford and stuff like that. I just don't rate Everton as highly as the other teams I've spoken about. Everton might be slightly better than Leeds, we'll have to see, but I do think Leeds have got slightly better fixtures. So that's why I've not included all those other goalkeepers. I appreciate there's probably going to be options at some point. Guaita, for example, at Crystal Palace for 4.5 could also be good. But again, the opening fixtures are just not good enough to include with Man City and Liverpool in the opening 4. Possibly someone for the first wildcard. Let's talk about that though. Let's get the first few game weeks out of the way. When we talk about wildcards, we'll talk about different options then. So there we go. That's my thoughts on goalkeepers. Let me know down in the comments below which goalkeeper is currently in your draft as the number 1. How much are you spending? It'd be interesting to get an idea from the community on this channel who you are going for. If you have enjoyed that video, please do give it a like and hit that subscribe button if you are new around here as well. I'll have the forwards video out soon just to complete this mini series. And of course, I'll be back tomorrow with another video. So I'll catch you then.